Okay, so Nettles is the next poem we're going to look at on page 63 of the anthology. A bit of background to Nettles. It's written by Vernon Scannell, I think you pronounce his name, Scannell. Originally from West Yorkshire. He's had great acclaim in his life as a poet and he's won some prestigious awards. His name was originally Bain, randomly, but he changed it shortly after World War II as he deserted from the army. His negative feelings about the effect of war have been prevailing influence on his work, and we see that metaphor of kind of war and battle in this poem. Okay, I'll read it to you first. We're on page 63. Nettles. My son, aged 3, fell into the nettle bed. Bed seemed a curious name for those green spears, that regiment of spite behind the shed. It was no place for rest. With sobs and tears the boy came seeking comfort, and I saw white blisters beaded on his tender skin. We soothed him till his pain was not so raw. At last he offered us a watery grin, and then I took my hook and honed the blade and went outside and slashed in fury with it till not a nettle in that fierce parade stood upright any more. Next task, I lit a funeral pyre to burn the fallen dead, but in 2 weeks the busy sun and rain had called up the tall recruits behind the shed. My son would often feel sharp wounds again. Okay, so on a first read you can probably sense there's this idea of sort of a battle kind of war metaphor going on here. And the nettles are the sort of central focus of the poem, but really even they're a metaphor. Because nettles are something that are largely unwanted and they can cause hurt, but they're also ever present.
Highly tied in with childhood as well, I think. Yeah. It's very rare as an adult that you come across
someone who's not had a nettle sting. Yeah. I suppose we could talk about small details, like it's in the plural, there are several, and it's this idea that the nettles are powerful because they're in a group. Okay, so we've got my son, aged 3, fell in the nettle bed. It feels like almost a very factual opening there, I think. Age 3 emphasising perhaps the vulnerability of that fall. And at age 3, are we looking back? Is there some awareness of sort of this is a significant memory? He fell in the nettle bed, and then that's picked up again with repetition. Bed seemed a curious name for those green spears. I think he's trying to contrast the idea of nettles creating a bed, which is usually a place of comfort, but they become spears, which are typically used in war and kind of battle.
As a father as well, that idea of comfort will be something that he's really places a lot of importance on for his son.
Yeah. And I think that when he said it seemed a curious name, I think curious is really carefully chosen, and what he really means is wrong. It's quite a critical point that he's making, but it's not outright critical at this point.
Yeah.
So we've got the idea of spears introducing sort of lexical choices from war and battle, maybe some sort of semantic field here. And then he says that regiment of spite. I really like that line. So regiment implies there's sort of unity in the nettles and that they have a sort of common, maybe a common goal, common identity. But the idea of spite, just really emotive and really hurtful. And obviously there's personification behind that, because really the nettles aren't trying to be these things. They just are. So that spite behind the shed, and I think they're the threat at the bottom of the garden, which is possibly a sort of metaphor for parenting, and the idea that in their own garden behind their own shed, but there's nowhere to hide almost. Threats are everywhere, if you like. It was no place for rest, and I think maybe there's anger there in that statement, that there should be, but there's not.
Yeah.
So with sobs and tears, so we've got the emotions. We've got the emotions coming through. The sobs and tears of the child. The boy came seeking comfort. Now I really like this line because what we know about his background, the idea that he's from this war context and is heavily influenced by that, I feel that this could be a wider metaphor here. The boy came seeking comfort. He is his boy and he is his son, but that could be anyone in any situation. And it just gives me that impression of war, that the boy came seeking comfort as you would do when you're injured.
And we've got that comfort, which kind of links with the rest and the bed.
Yes.
And all of those kind of, the way that a father would want to...
support.
Yeah.
So the boy came seeking comfort, and I saw white blisters beaded on his tender skin. Tender, I feel, is to emphasise again his vulnerability, how young he is, and that instinct to protect him, that even his skin is very tender, that there's a newness to him that he needs almost preserving. The white blisters beaded, the alliteration there, they sound overly aggressive. And maybe the whiteness on the skin is quite shocking. We soothed him till his pain was not so raw. Well, that's what parents do. So I think the idea of soothing, trying to calm, trying to develop a calmness there. Till his pain was not so raw implies that it did remain a bit raw though. So maybe an idea about parenting, that you can't stop everything.
Yeah.
You can't make everything better. At last, so the idea of time passing, he offered us a watery grin.
I think that word choice of offered is really important because it suggests that they were waiting for something.
Yeah, waiting for a response.
Yeah.
Watery grin, happy but tears, maybe, smiling through the pain, that sort of idea. So when he's got this watery grin, when he's got some sort of response, then we see action then. And then, I think there's something in that sort of conjunction there. That idea of and then, so then action or feelings were provoked such that he did something. And then I took my hook and honed the blade, spent time preparing.
Which seems like real kind of depth of preparation for something that's going to be as simple as
slaying nettles.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of honing the blade as well, preparing the punishment, committing to it, and almost, if you've been in war, that idea that you do have your weapons ready, you do prepare, you have got your equipment. And went outside. So we've got these simple sentence constructions, and then I did this, and then I did that, almost listing it like a recall.
Yeah.
Went outside, obviously slashed in fury.
I think that contrasts a little bit with honing the blade.
Yeah.
Because slashing in fury suggests a
Not
lot
control.
more. It's a raw emotional response, isn't it?
So slashed in fury with it, till not a nettle in that fierce parade stood upright. I think now what we're getting at, till not a nettle stood upright. There was nothing left there that could hurt the child, but there's a sort of, there's possibly here we're getting to a naivety. There's a naivety to assume that is task done, because the thing about nettles, as we all know, is that they do grow back.
Yeah.
And it's that mention of them now, they're green spears, they were spiteful, and now they're a fierce parade almost that he took them on. That they were attempting a parade, some sort of...
Yeah, and he strongly believes that the threat that they offered was a tough one to match, a tough one to stand up to.
Yeah. So they didn't stand up right anymore. Next task, a military way of looking at that, I feel. That's quite sort of making it all a bit, what's the phrase I'm looking for, sort of job orientated, like a bit, again, maybe trying to regain control there.
Detachment from the emotion.
Yeah. So the idea that he slashed it in fury till not a nettle in the fierce parade stood right anymore. Next task, I lit a funeral pyre. The idea of burning it, cremation, and of the fallen dead, clearly a reference to war there, I feel. That they are now dead, and in that death, I'm not sure, do they have some more status? Now they're fallen dead, he feels happier, he can... I'm not sure, because fallen dead's usually quite a respectful term.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And it that feels at odds with the kind of them being a fierce parade, but maybe in death they're not a threat anymore, so he can
give them some sort of
see them different, see them for what they are, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But in 2 weeks, the busy sun and rain had called up tall recruits behind the shed.
I think the simplicity of sun and rain shows the kind of actual simplicity of the fact that these are plants and they'll just keep growing back. Contrasting with his the kind of way that he overcomplicates it by calling them a parade and an army, when actually they are just plants that the sun and rain will help to grow again.
And I think also there we're getting at the inevitability that he cannot protect his own child, and that there's a realisation there that time passes, things go on, and issues will keep coming back.
And natural things as well, sun and rain and natural.
Yeah.
So
natural threats that exist.
Yeah.
So my son, so then we're back where we started. We've got some sort of repetition here at the beginning and the end. My son, that possession, that maybe that ownership and that feeling of responsibility that the father has. He would often feel sharp wounds again. So now we're in this sort of future tense, where we're really looking at an acknowledgement that this was perhaps the first of many such instances. But here the sharp wounds could be a metaphor for any type of injury, not necessarily physical, just the kind of issues that he'll sort of face in his life, I think, that he would often feel sharp wounds again.
Also kind of ignorance of the fact that, is the son going to go and play in the Nettles again after what happened to him? Was that not learning enough for him?
Yeah.
You know, like it's almost like he doesn't understand that he may learn from that, and it's not necessarily his responsibility to stop it from happening ever again. Yeah,
and the acknowledgement that that's part of life, and that part of being a parent is he couldn't protect him from that. So we've almost got like a narrative poem that tells us a story. This is the story. He went in the garden, he fell in the nettles, but then the narrative becomes more of a metaphor for parenting, managing child's pain, knowing how to step back, and maybe accepting that those initial falls are much more significant, and then over time maybe become a bit more acclimatised.
We've got the sonnet structure as well, haven't we, which is probably an important thing to comment on, because sonnets are usually related to love. And interesting that the poem is called Nettles, so we would assume, if we just saw the sonnet and the title Nettles, we would assume it was love for the nettles.
Yeah. And we have got, let me just check regular rhyme scheme throughout, so it's A-B, A-B, bed, shed. Oh no, it's not. Spears, tears, saw, raw. Yeah, it's a regular rhyme scheme, and some of these words, if we look at them closely, so we've got bed, spears, shed, tears, saw, skin, raw, grin, blade. They're a sort of, they're the sort of, almost some of the aggressive words.
Yeah. I think it's important because I don't remember which sonnet. There's a Shakespearean and Petrarchan, but one of them usually ends with a couplet. Is that Shakespearean sonnet? Yeah. But Vernon Scannell has deliberately chosen the type of sonnet where it does not end with a couplet, and perhaps that could represent the kind of lack of finality to this. So the acknowledgement that this will continue to happen over and over again, and we actually can't.
Or I think further to that, coming out of the sonnet form, so kind of going with it and having that rhyme scheme and having that control, and then stepping back, because obviously a rhyme scheme is about control, isn't it? So controlling the feelings throughout and then stepping back and acknowledging that actually now I can see it like this, whereas at the time clearly he was quite hot-headed and embroiled in it.